Hey, Collin, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
Good, good. I've definitely seen your videos. There are a lot of them. One thing I have to say I really enjoy is talking to fellow creators, but especially, those who do a lot of travel, vlogging content. We actually recently had a chance to talk to Thomas, the co-founder of Yes Theory as well. So.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's just because as I tell everybody, I'm like the least well-traveled person you'll ever meet, so kind of get that vicarious satisfaction from watching your content. But for probably a lot of people, especially in Asia, that might not be familiar with what you do, how do you normally introduce yourself to people these days?
First off, I'll tell them like I make YouTube videos and whatnot, and then it's typically, oh, what do you make YouTube videos of? Travel videos. Oh, okay. What kind of travel videos? And then I tell them like bargaining in the markets. And every time I say something, I always have to be like, it sounds weird, but it's quite entertaining if you would watch it. So.
Oh, it's entertaining for damn sure. Is there anybody else that you know who does what you do and as well?
I've seen people do one-off videos about it. I haven't seen anybody have a whole channel that's just focused on that. So
you're a content creator and a professional bargainer.
Right, yeah.
I think it's a very unique skill set, and every time I watch your videos, for example, I almost get a heart attack.
For real?
It gets so brutal, and bargaining is something that not many people can do. I don't know if you know that.
Right, yeah, well, that's what I've noticed in the comments is I get people all the time like, I could never do this. And I don't blame them, because before I even tried doing it, I would be like, yeah, I would never do this.
So, in my case, even when I was little and, my mom's, let's say, the Asian mom is trying to bargain the crap out of every single item that we buy. And I'm like, can we just go?
Right.
How do you even get into this thing? So you're originally from Wisconsin in the US.
Correct.
Maybe you can just walk us through a little bit of your background.
Okay. Yeah. So 2015, I was just working a job that I didn't like. And I just sat down with myself and I'm like, what do I want to do with my life? And it was always travel. I just want to travel, but I don't want to go on vacation, go for 2 weeks, then come back home. I wanted to experience something totally outside my comfort zone. So I thought about that in 2012, 2013. Over the next few years, I was trying to figure out how I can do this. And then I came across an article about teaching English in China. And it was pretty much that's the typical expat job. It's teaching English in Asia or South America, whatever. Yeah. And it sounded nice. Pay was good. But half of it was I also wanted to start a YouTube channel. So it was just the perfect fit. And that's just how I got into it. I just jumped right into it. So I've been doing that ever since.
And if you're from Wisconsin and let's say from your hometown, were there a lot of people to whom even going to China to teach English was something that people do, something that typical Americans do, right?
Absolutely not. I remember telling people, hey, I think I'm going to move to China. And they're like, what are you going to do? I'm going to teach English. You don't have a teaching degree. Well, I was told in China I don't need one. So nobody believed me when I told them that. But over the next year, I was like, yeah, I'm doing it. And they're like, no, you aren't. No, I'm doing it until I did it. And then that was that. It's been a wrap from there.
So you didn't have any prior connections in China, any friends, nothing?
Nothing. That was the thing too, is I just wanted to experience something so different from what I'm used to, back home. So that was the thing. And especially moving to China, for me, China was the most different, or even in Asia in general, but China mostly because China, not a lot of people in China, well, a lot of people in China speak English, but you go into the more mainland cities where I was living, and it was difficult. It was difficult getting around, learning Chinese. My Chinese wasn't the greatest, but that's what I wanted. So
yeah. Well, let's get into that because, especially when we talk about China, these days, everything just seems so damn political that
Right.
like you can't even mention the word China without being branded in a certain way. But I'd imagine for you, like back in 2012 or 2013, what was sort of your perception of China as a country at the time?
Yeah, at the time I didn't really have much because I didn't really research. Like today you mentioned, like you said, today you mentioned China, people automatically just go politics, politics. So when I moved to China, or when I was telling people I was moving to China, they would start talking about like the government and stuff. And I'm like, that's nothing I want to like deal with. That's not, the government is not representative of the everyday person. But that's the sentiment when you don't know something. Like in China, or I mean back home, people would think of China in a bad light. In my view, when I was going to China and I was making these videos, I wanted to represent it like, no, this is how it really is in China, because it's really not how you think. It's not how the media portrays it. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, I totally feel you there. I guess that's why, even for us, we always just wanted to focus on capturing the authentic voices and, perspectives from Asia, not just China, but, all the other different Asian countries.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can totally relate to what you were trying to do. So what does that process entail? Like, do you need to apply for visa as an American citizen? How do you sort of get into China at the time?
Yeah, so at the time, I reached out to a company and they, we had the interview and everything and they set everything up. They got me my visa. Obviously, I had to send in my documents to them and whatnot, but they set it all up for me. And when I got on that plane from Chicago to Shanghai, I didn't know what I was doing because I was going to like this little city called Wuhu, not to be confused with Wuhan, but it's like a 2-hour, 3-hour train ride. And I remember just like, all right, so I'm going to be in Shanghai for 4 days. Somebody from the school is supposed to pick me up. I have no contact at all. He's just supposed to knock on my hotel door. Right. And so it was just all putting all my faith into this school's words. And I thought, worst comes to worst, I'll just get back on the plane and go home.
Right.
But
so when you get there, and you're probably the only foreigner like around that area, right?
Yeah. Well, I was kind of lucky because I was at a hostel that had a couple other foreigners, so we all hung out, did all the tourist stuff and whatnot. So. And
so you started teaching English, and how was that experience?
I enjoyed it. A lot of other people that I knew in China teaching English, they typically didn't like it. But like for me, I just enjoyed it because when you're teaching English as a foreigner in China, you don't need to teach them like grammatical stuff. You don't need to teach them like nouns, verbs, all that, how to form a sentence. They just want you to speak how you speak as a native because they already know English to an extent.
Well, they know English grammar. They study English grammar, but doesn't mean they can actually have a conversation, just like Korean.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So yeah, it's just pretty much just kind of correcting how they form their sentences and whatnot. So it was a pretty easy job. When I first started, I was only working like 10 hours a week. So that freed up a lot of time for me to start my YouTube channel, which is what my goal was. So
yeah. And how did you start off? Like at the time, was this whole like bargaining for items something that you always wanted to do or try out, or you just wanted to kind of like do the regular vlogging type of travel videos?
Well, yeah, okay, so that's how I started. I started with like the regular style travel vlogs. I even brought the camera into my classroom to show you how to teach English or how it is to teach English. We went to like tourist sites like on the mountains and whatnot, but it was in like 2016, so I was there for like 5 months. My friend from back home, he's like, hey, I'm going to come to Shanghai. We're going to hang out, whatever. And so I was like, all right, we're going to make some travel vlogs there, right? So we're sitting in like our little hostel, and I'm looking online. I'm like, what are things to do in Shanghai? And one of them was like fake market. I'm like, that sounds cool. But I thought like fake market, we'd have to go into like this like sketchy dark back alley and whatnot. But it wasn't. It was like this huge mall in the city center of Shanghai. And I remember we walked up in there and I knew the stuff was fake. And I wasn't going in there planning on bargaining. We were just going in there just to check it out, make a travel vlog, right? And I remember we were talking to a shop owner and I was like, how much are these like Nike Air Max? And they're like $80. And I'm like, are they original? They're like first copy. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to do that. I start walking away. And then they come down on their price like $30. I'm like, wait, that doesn't make sense. So that's how that all started. It was that moment where it was just like, all right, well, if he's going down $30, let's see if I can go down an extra $20. So
right. First of all, I think a lot of people are quite surprised if they're outside of Asia. This whole the very notion of fake goods market, and that's just not just a phenomenon that's happening in China, but at least like visibly, there's stuff in Korea that you can get. Why do you think there are like just so many fake goods in Asia? Like, and we're talking like Thailand, Vietnam, Korea, China. What was sort of your first impression of like when you came across these fake goods markets?
Yeah, so I think it's because a lot of it's manufactured out here, and what I've realized doing these videos and going on these travels is a lot of it, what I've heard and what I've seen is like the factory workers at the legit factories. This is just one way, by the way. There's many different ways. People make fake goods in their homes or whatever with random materials. But one way is I've heard that like people take materials from like, say if they're working at like the North Face. This is like a huge thing in Vietnam. People who work at the legit factory will take materials out of the factory and then they'll sew them up at home and create them. So it's like the real materials, but they do it themselves because they know how to do it. It was the same in Sri Lanka. They have the Polo factory, Ralph Lauren. It was the same deal. So I think it's just because most things are manufactured here that it's very easy to get the goods you need to be able to sell them.
And by now, are you like an expert at being able to distinguish what's the real deal and if something's fake, like something's a little off, or I know that there are different grades to, you just said,
right.
Oh, it's the first copy and whatnot. How do you tell the fake goods from the real stuff?
I don't get like super particular. I can't go down to like the thread count or anything like that, like a lot of other people can. But just because I come across so many different varieties of goods. But it's just over time you realize you can feel it. Like you put on the shoe, it's like, yeah, this does not feel legit at all. This feels fake. It's just a lot of experience of over the years, and you can pretty much tell right away if something's like really bad quality or not.
I guess I'm just kind of, in general, kind of curious to learn the way you look at things and how you observe a particular culture has evolved over time, because again, here's an American guy who came to China to teach English, and they ended up traveling to, let's say, over 30 different countries. And so your worldview, might have shifted quite a bit. But at the time when you just started going around in China, and I know that we're just talking about very different times, even back then, maybe the government policies were a little bit different to what it is now. When you started living in China, like how was your perception of China as a country and its people?
Oh, I loved it. So it's because, like you said, all you know before you go is from what you learn in the media. So I tried to be aware, before I left, I tried to be aware of that's probably not how it is. Do not let like the media put a little bias on me, right? So I went there with an open mind. And to be honest, I'm going to talk about the food here. I never liked Chinese food before I went to China. So I was like, oh, I'm going to have to go to like McDonald's every day, or I'm going to have to like buy like chicken breasts or whatever. Right. No, let me tell you, that food in China is incredible. So I found a newfound love for this Chinese food. But going back to like the people and everything, what I've learned over the travels is, like I said, going back to the media, what they say about this country's government, what they say about that country's government. The government is not representative of the people. And what I've learned through all these travels over like 30 some countries is that we're all the same in the fact that we just want to be loved. We just want to be happy. We just want to live and have a good life. The only thing that separates us are like cultural norms or things like that. You know what I'm saying? So that's the biggest thing that I've learned is that you can go to Kenya, you can go to Turkey, you can go to China, and you'll see these traits in people all over the world. It's just the same thing.
Well, I guess, and I know that's how you genuinely feel, but then at the same time, there are a lot of, let's say, vloggers who used to live in China as foreigners, and I listen to them sometimes, and apparently like things have changed, or even back then, For foreigners, there's no complete freedom of movement. Like, you can't really go from point A to point B. A lot of let's say restrictions about how you can travel and things like that. How true is that from your perspective?
While living in China?
While living in China, yeah.
Oh, within China was quite easy. Just because, well, we're talking at that time. It was easy because you could just hop on a train, get a train ticket. You could go to any city in China. The only thing that was difficult was, crossing borders. So if I wanted to go to Hong Kong, you would get questioned at the border.
Actually, yeah, I don't even know what that's like. How do you cross borders from China to Hong Kong?
As an American, I didn't need a visa to go to Hong Kong. So you would just cross the border. You just walk up. You take a train from whatever city, go down to Shenzhen, and then there's a land crossing. It's like a bridge that goes over the river that separates Hong Kong and Shenzhen. So it's quite easy. Coming back is a little bit more difficult because you go to Hong Kong to renew your visa, right? So you got to go into Hong Kong, renew your visa, talk to a visa officer, all that. That takes a few days, and then you have to come back and then probably get questioned at the border again with your new visa and everything. So it's a little bit of a process, but it's not anything too difficult. So I wouldn't tell people not to do it because if they think that's an issue, it's really not.
And how long were you in China for when you were, I know you started enjoying teaching in English in China, and how long did that actually last?
So I went to China end of 2015, and then I left China officially March of 2018. So I've been there 2.5 years about.
And that's when you slowly started, almost like define your niche as a bargaining YouTuber type of thing.
Right. Yeah. So that's why I left China, is because one of my videos blew up on YouTube, and I was just like, all right, the time is actually now. If I ever want to do this full time, this is the time to do it. So, and then I've just been traveling around ever since.
Yeah, yeah. And so given that there are so many different marketplaces that you can visit to bargain for things, how do you decide to just bargain? For example, what does that process entail? I have no idea how to bargain for things. So do you just sort of go there and just ask for, how much is this? But do you sort of have a rough price in mind that I'm not going to pay anything above that? Or are you just doing it more for kind of entertainment purposes, just to see how low you can go? So let's say I'm a tourist, I've never been to China, and I go there and I'm like, I don't speak their language, but I want to get a good deal. How do you make that happen?
All right. So as a tourist, I would go in. First off, about the language, most of these markets, most people just speak English by default because these markets are set up for tourists. So going into these markets, and I hear this a lot, is people feel bad or they feel cheap for bargaining. But you just got to let go of that and understand that the person selling you this is trying to get 5 times the price out of you. So if you go in with that mindset, okay, I'm not going to pay 5 times the price of what this is actually worth, then I would just go in with a rule of thumb, whatever initial price that they give out, start at 10 to 20%. And then you just feel it out from there. And worst comes to worst, just walk away and you'll see if whatever price they're giving you was a bluff or not. Because they'll either call you back or they'll let you go. Trying to understand the value of these products is difficult because if you're not used to seeing many different fakes from all over the world or whatnot, it's very difficult to really get a price. So my rule of thumb for these days are, if it's a good pair of quality shoes, $30 is okay. A nice belt would be $15. A wallet maybe $10. So
interesting. So when you just say that, they're definitely just bluffing you and it's literally 5x, how do you come up with that estimation? How do you know that the true worth of that is only $30 as opposed to $150?
Just by the amount of shoes I've haggled for over the years. Yeah, I would say on average I could get probably $25, $30. But there are very, very high-end shoes. So in the real shoes, there's very rare type of shoes, Nike collabed with so-and-so brand, right? those shoes, because those are high and those are rare, that leaks into the fake markets too as well. So the prices there are going to be higher for those types of shoes.
Let's take, for example, let's take a Nike Air Force One.
Okay.
And I think, like, what is a retail at typically in the U.S.?
It depends. I don't know off the top of my head because I haven't shopped for Nike Air Force Ones in some time. But I don't know. Is it like $100 or so?
Yeah, something like that, right?
Yeah.
So, how much do you think that's actually worth in China for the knockoff?
Yeah, you could get it. I mean, if it's good quality, $20, $30.
And do they tell you that it's fake? It's like,
yeah.
Oh, do they? Okay.
Yeah, that's one thing that it's actually really nice about these markets is there's probably one or two people I've came across that have tried to pawn it off as real, but every time that I've asked, like, oh, is this legit? They're like, no, it's first copy.
What does it mean, first copy?
Like,
as opposed to like a second copy.
Yeah, like the grade types. So you got like the grade A copies, like first copy meaning like very good quality, and then you can go down. So some shops will have multiple qualities of shoes, and I'll be like, how much for this? They're like $50, and then I'll be like, oh, how much for these? Because they look similar. Those are $30, and I'll be like, oh, what's the difference between these two? And they're like, first copy, second copy. I'll be like, oh, you can't do $30 for the first copy, so.
Do you think that you can kind of use that same almost like negotiation tactics in order to be able to haggle for like a real stuff as well? Like, or do you know that's possible just because it's fake goods? Yeah,
well, that's here's the thing. I get a lot of people in the comments being like, oh, try to go bargain at Nike. The difference is the way the business is ran. So Nike obviously has posted prices, right? But me going into Nike, looking at these posted prices, I either think, do I want them for that price or no? The thing with like the legit stuff is you get things like standard of quality. Every Nike shoe is pretty much has to live up to this standard of quality. You get a warranty, you get a return policy, you know what you're getting, so you know that price is fair. When you go to these markets, there is no standard of quality. There's no posted prices, which is why they run their business, because they know if they can get 4 out of 5 tourists to pay 3 to 5 times that price, that's more lucrative than them posting the same price for all the shoes.
Right.
And going back to like the reason you need to haggle is, like I said, you don't know where these are made. You don't know the standard of quality. You can't return them. You don't know if they're going to last a day or a year. So that's why that's essentially what you're haggling over. You're haggling over that aspect of it.
And so when you buy all these like fake goods and you make great content out of it, it's like, were you surprised that, first of all, that the video is just going to get millions of hits, and then people are just like super fascinated by the very thing that you were doing? And what was your reaction to the type of virality of your content?
Absolutely. Like I said, like when I tell people, it's like, it's weird, but just watch it. At first, I didn't really understand it because I made a few of those videos. I knew the fake markets were interesting because, like, that's crazy. You can just go to this mall and buy fake goods for really cheap prices. And so I understood that aspect of it. But I think over time, I started to understand that people like the interaction. It's like I've been told by friends, like, it's like you're watching a sport and you're cheering for one person to win, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, if that's what it is, and people are still watching it, I'm going to continue doing it because I love it. I, like we said earlier, I had never thought about just being like, no, I'm going to go to that market and haggle for a video. That'd be cool. Like, no, it's just like I started to gain this love for it over time because I've always been like a big fan of psychology. So it's a lot of psychology, body language, whatnot. And you get really intuitive when you keep doing that over time and whatnot. So,
well, if I'm ever traveling anywhere in China or Asia, I think I'm going to just hit you up. And then
hey, I'll come to Seoul.
Oh, you've never been to Seoul before?
Well, I have. I went to the Myeongdong market.
Oh, yeah. Actually, yeah, that's where you can definitely apply the same skill set.
Yeah.
Yeah, so then why did you decide to leave China after, like, was that after all your videos just went super viral and now you know that, oh, I can do this pretty much anywhere in Asia? Or would you have stayed in China for longer if you had to?
Because a video blew up and my channel started like gaining traction, I was like, all right, if I want to do this full time, I'm going to probably have to leave China and try other places. But at the time, I only thought at the time that China had these markets. I didn't even think Hong Kong had these markets. So I was like, all right, I'm going to go to Hong Kong. Hong Kong has these markets. So it was like every country I go to, it opened up my eyes to these markets are all over the world. You can even, I've been to New York City. They have these in New York City. Los Angeles, they have these in Los Angeles. And like that to me blew my mind. So like even in like places like Kenya or like obviously Morocco, Egypt, Turkey, everywhere like that. I didn't realize that was the case until I actually went there.
So which country did you decide to go to next after China right away?
Yeah, so it's China, and then I went down to Hong Kong, then I went to Bali, and then I stayed around Southeast Asia, so like Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Philippines, and then from there, pretty much, I went to like Turkey, and then once the lockdowns came, I was actually stuck in Egypt for like 5 months, and ended up going up throughout Europe and whatnot. So because we were just traveling with like the path of least resistance at the time. So I recently went back to Thailand a couple months ago. So that was a breath of fresh air because that was my first time in Asia in like 3 years. It was crazy.
So, you know, there you were, like, you know, you're this American kid from Wisconsin, and then now you just pretty much become like Asia expert. You just traveled to all these different countries in Southeast Asia, and I'm sure they're a little bit different from China as well. Right. What stood out to you the most about all these like different Asian cultures?
Not culturally. I just like to call myself an observer. I like to observe and try not to judge. Right. But inwardly, it was definitely, I feel more free when I'm traveling to other countries. So when I was living in China, you feel a more sense of freedom as a foreigner because you're pretty much exempt from society. You're not...
Interesting.
The Chinese don't look at you as a part of society, so it's kind of like you're doing your own thing. Like they look at you like, oh, it's just a foreigner doing his own thing. I don't know. You get away with a lot of like, I don't know, a lot of like petty stuff. Not like breaking the law or anything, but like I said, it's because you're exempt from society that you're not. There's no expectations of you. Pretty much is what you can sum it up as.
Right. What about then you go to Thailand, for example? Like what's it like there?
Thailand's more international. I really like Thailand for that aspect. Traveling throughout China was like on hard mode. That was the first country I've ever went to, because not a lot of people, in my experience, that I've interacted with speak English. So it was a lot of Google Translate. You know, showing the taxi driver like the address in Chinese and whatnot. From there on out, traveling has just been like so easy because everybody speaks English. You can go anywhere else in the world and people will speak English. And they'll speak it straight to you because they just see you as a foreigner and they assume you know English. So it's a lot easier traveling, and that's kind of what I like about it. But yeah, just being able to experience new foods, new cultures and whatnot. So
are there any like crazy memories or super interesting experiences you had either in China or Thailand or these type of places where you maybe thought potentially you could get in some trouble just because you seem to go to really interesting places?
Yeah, there's something. So in Thailand, I remember my first month there, I got stopped by the police like 3 times, and I'm talking like just 2 cops on a motorcycle. I'm walking down this like dark street, and they just get off their bike and start questioning you for no reason at all, because you know they're gonna try to get a bribe out of you. But at the time, I'm like, I'm gonna start live streaming. They're like, live stream. They knew what I was trying to do, so they let me go. But like for the next 2 weeks, out of nowhere, you just get randomly stopped. So that's something that you should be wary of. It's not a common occurrence, except for at that time, 3 times in 1 month. But ever since then, I haven't had any situations like that. But just be aware that that could happen in basically any country of the world. You see people on YouTube having to pay off cops in, say, Ethiopia, because the cops are looking for a bribe. So that's definitely one of the things, because you don't want to go to jail in a different country. Absolutely not.
Wow. Well, yeah, actually, I thought that Thailand would have been, I don't know why cops expect to get bribes. I never heard that before.
There was even a time where, at the time we were with my girlfriend, she's Thai, and we were in the back of a taxi. It was me, her, and another friend. And it was just a random checkpoint. The police shine a flashlight at the taxi, and you have to get out. And I remember she was like, I'm going to watch your pockets. So they were checking us, but they weren't checking her. So, yeah, it's very, like I said, thankfully it hasn't happened since then, but it was something to definitely just have in the back of your mind.
Right. And in that case, how much do you have to kind of pay them to just get off your back?
Well, luckily I haven't had to pay anything. But I would say, I don't know, carry $10 on you and that's it. Try not to carry too much cash, because they're not going to make you go to the ATM, right? Just open your wallet, be like, here's $10.
Oh, okay. Okay, so now you're you're a recognized YouTuber. You get millions of views, and people kind of rely on you for these type of content. And is it just a matter of you constantly traveling and then just visiting interesting places? Now it almost becomes like a cultural experience now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I was saying before I left China, I didn't realize there was other places like this. But so now it's just going from country to country to country to experience each of these markets. And I like doing it because that's where you get the real business transactions, and you get a real feel for the people of that country in those types of markets, with how they do business, how they interact with you and whatnot. So it's not like going on a tour, like a tour guide, you're not going on a tour with a guide and they take you to all these tourist shops where everybody's going to be friendly with you, obviously, just because they know they're making money off of you. But that's what I like about it the most. It's you get a sense for how real the people are there. Because
of your YouTube videos, and you're one of the top creators now, right? So I'm assuming that financially you're doing pretty well. But sometimes do you kind of feel a sense of compassion that, oh man, these people really struggling, and for them, even let's say $5, $10 is just a lot of money. At least that's how I see them. So I kind of feel bad for, let's say, even if they were overcharging you, and that you can clearly see what they're doing, do you sometimes feel like going, yeah, all right, I'll just, to me it's not a lot of money, they probably could use it. How do you kind of separate that type of mindset to the whole bargaining thing?
Yeah, there's absolutely times where it's all right, here's a couple extra dollars, here's a tip. I'll give them what they just asked for or whatnot. But to separate the mind, and actually I explain this to people, because in the comments I get people oh, what's $5 to you? It means the world to them. There's more efficient ways. If I feel like I'm in a giving mood, there's more efficient ways to give $5 to somebody who needs it on the streets, rather than wasting time bargaining over cheap knockoffs. You know what I'm saying? So you got to separate that it's a business transaction versus a charitable transaction.
Good point.
So that's,
good point.
Yeah. It's just separating business from charity. And when it comes down to it, we're not bargaining over the person's livelihood. We're bargaining over a pair of cheap knockoff shoes. You know what I'm saying? If they agree with the price, then obviously they're making profit off of it. If they don't agree with the price, then that's just, okay, we just spent 5 minutes talking, and that's how business works. So no harm, no foul.
I'm actually quite interested in the whole psychological aspect of the negotiation process. So how do you sort of typically start off? Let's say there's an item, and is it just a question of you stating your position when the other person says, I'll get $100, and then do you just immediately, yeah, no, I'll give you $10? How does that start, other than you try to walk away from the whole thing to give yourself more leverage? Are there any particular useful tips that you could share with our viewers?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of people think like if you go into the store, ask for the price, and just walk away, that they'll be coming running after you. Walking away is a really, really good strategy. However, you have to engage first. You have to sit there, chat with them, you know, maybe ask how their day is, shop around a little bit, be like, how much are these? How much are these? So once you're engaged, then they're more likely, when you walk away, when you decide to walk away, they're more likely to call you back because at least you respected them enough to at least have a conversation with them.
So they have to know that you're sort of interested.
Oh, yeah.
And then they know that you're engaged somewhat, and then you guys can start negotiating. So after that, let's say you chit chat, hey, how's your day going? What are you looking for? I don't know, that looks kind of interesting. And then what happens next?
So what happens next is, like, say if I'm interested in a pair of shoes, I'll be like, how much are these? And they'll be like, say like $50. I'll be like, do you have, my go-to is I have like this like set budget in mind. I'll be like, oh, I'm really only looking to spend like $10 to $20. Do you have anything for $10 to $20? And they'll be like, these quality over here are $10 to $20. And then I'll be like, well, what about these? How about these $10, $20? Going back to the original price. So it kind of eases yourself rather than just being like, how much are these? They'll say $50. You'll be like, nope, 20. It kind of eases into the situation rather than just being blunt about it. Because I feel like that's going back to a lot of people feeling not easy about bargaining. That's a way to ease into the situation.
Right, right. And you're easing them into the situation too.
Correct, yeah. So that's what I'm saying about like engaging, like not just being blunt about it, but you know, just shopping around their shop a little bit. Show them that you're interested in something, you know, and that you're willing to buy something.
Man, this is super useful. I should be taking notes. So because this is one aspect that I'm like dying to learn, because it sounds like it's an actual skill set you can apply to many different aspects of your life.
Right.
So let's say, you're like, okay, well, can you show me something in the $10 to $20 range? And then they say, what about this? Oh, yeah, but what about that one? That looks nicer. And there's like, oh yeah, but that's $50. But then what do you do after that?
I would offer, I'll be like, I got 10, like I would probably jokingly offer them $10 just to engage. Like, you can't do $10, like, you know, just like as a joke, like an obvious joke. And then from their reaction, you'll be able to gauge like how much they might be willing to come down. They'll be like, nah, 40 last price, you know, and be like, well, maybe, let me take a look. And then you take a look at them and be like, maybe I got 20 for you, you know, and then they'll come down. Like, so it's always meeting in the middle. And this is the thing, going back to what you're saying about like feeling bad about negotiating, is you're not trying to win. Like, you're not trying to get them for the low. Obviously, they're trying to get the highest price. You're trying to get the lowest price. But you got to go into it trying to get a fair price for you, because they hold all the leverage. You know, they don't have to sell to you. That's the thing, is like, as a buyer, you're always at a disadvantage because, one, you don't know their profit margins, and they do. So as a buyer going into these places, it's better to go in trying to get a fair price. I'm looking for the fair price because I already know you're trying to get like 2-3 times the price for it. So it's just trying to get the fair price that we both can agree upon.
And so at which point do you decide to walk away when you realize that, hey, I'm getting close to the fair price, but it's not happening, and they're standing pretty firm, but you know that's not the fair price?
You just walk away. You can probably go back and forth a little bit, but if they're really not willing to budge, then the last tactic is just, all right, I'm gonna walk away. And if I walk away, because at that moment, I'm pretty much made up my mind if I am going to buy it or not for that price that they won't budge upon. And if I made up my mind, yes, I'm going to walk away to see if they follow me. That's just like the last thing.
And then in terms of the percentage, like, you know, what percent of the time do you normally get like, oh, okay, fine, like I'll give you at that price? Or does that actually work? Because it sounds like you genuinely mean it when you walk away, as opposed to bluffing yourself.
Right, yeah. So if I made up my mind, like if we were going back and forth and they don't budge, and I have my mind made up that like, all right, maybe I'm gonna buy these for these. However, I'm gonna walk away. If they come after me, then I know I can get it for cheaper. If they don't come after me, then I gotta decide, all right, I'm gonna walk back and go grab them. I really want them. That was a good price.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's just a one hell of entertainment for the viewers, and it almost sounds like it's like a sport, right? Where you just kind of, you know, everybody walks away win-win with something, and then it sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, it's definitely a sport, and it's definitely something that I would encourage people to try, because you don't know if you like it until you try. You don't know if you like basketball until you try. Same thing.
But do you think that you naturally have that type of outgoing, very personable, friendly vibe, and not to mention you're like a foreigner in their country, so do you feel like that's something that anybody can do? So for example, if I went there and they're like, oh, there's this like Asian dude that looks like us, and then like maybe that's not gonna work as well.
Yeah, it's like you really have to prepare yourself for going in. Like even if I wake up in a bad mood, I just know that my mood, if I'm in a bad mood, it's going to be a terrible experience. Nobody's going to want to deal with me. You know what I'm saying? So you got to go in with the mindset of like, all right, I'm going to be happy-go-lucky today. Let's go do this, because you're not going to get a good price if you go in with a bad mood. So
interesting. That's something that's I didn't know that you have to get yourself into that good mood.
Absolutely.
And then that kind of the vibe kind of spreads.
Yep.
So that people are like, oh yeah, this is not like a nice guy.
Yeah, it's all about how you come off to other people and vice versa, right? I feel like the majority of people that these sellers deal with are people who aren't in a good mood. So when you're the one person coming across them, and you're happy, you're smiling, you're joking with them, they're going to probably give you a good price, because you're just making their day a little bit easier.
Wow, yeah, that's a perspective I never thought about. So these people are probably just not in the best of mood.
Right.
You know, just their everyday life. If anything, they must be bored, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're bringing some excitement to their day, at least.
Let's say you keep on doing the travel, and then you start negotiating for looking for good bargains all over the world. How did something like the pandemic affect you? Like, and how did you find out? Like, where were you at when they start announcing lockdowns, and then the country starts shutting down?
Yeah. Okay. So this is a good question. I remember December of that year. So the word COVID wasn't like mainstream until like more towards the end of December. I remember going to Singapore, then Bangladesh at the beginning of December. From Bangladesh to back home here was like maybe December 4th or something. And then, living life. And then all of a sudden the word COVID starts coming up, and like, things kind of like slowly progressed into March. And I remember in like February, I was like, if I want to keep making videos, and if they do lock down, I didn't believe there was going to be anything like a lockdown, like a lot of us didn't believe.
Well, yeah, I don't think anybody believed at the current scale that we've seen that this was going to be the case. Yeah,
absolutely. And I remember I was like, all right, I can't really work here. If I want to continue making videos, I'm a travel vlogger. I need to travel. So I was like, all right, I'm going to go to Egypt. And because I was like, if I'm in Egypt and I'm locked down in Egypt, at least I can still make content somewhere else, because making content in my bedroom would be kind of boring to watch.
Why Egypt? Did you know? Did you have some sort of a heads up that at least within Egypt you can travel freely within the country, or?
That was just next on my plan, really. Like I had always wanted to go to Egypt just because I had heard that they bargain hard there and the markets there are crazy. So I was like, all right, if I go to Egypt, and I remember the first, like, I think it was like the third day I was there. I remember I was in the market, and the seller was like, you go home today? And I'm like, no. They're like, airports are closing. I'm like, wow. I'm staying. I'm staying. Like, so I was in Egypt for 5 months due to that. But looking back at that, I'm glad I did it. And it just traveling obviously sucked throughout the pandemic. I met up with a friend. We met up in Istanbul, and we were just doing path of least resistance at the time. Like we went to like Albania, Eastern Europe, and then
You're describing a number of countries that didn't lock down at the time, right? When you talk, what exactly was the path of least resistance?
okay,
So
yeah.
from Egypt.
So we're talking like a good 7 months in. So we went to Istanbul, Turkey. That's where I met my friend. And then we went to, I think it was Serbia, then Albania. And then we took a trip to Morocco, like the next year after, back to Albania, Tunisia, Kenya, Tanzania. So yeah, it was Eastern Europe into Africa.
So for those countries, there were no lockdowns.
There wasn't really at the time. I mean, I don't know if there was prior to when we went. Well, actually, Albania, there was like a curfew. So there was a lot of curfews in these countries. But there was not any like, at the time I was there was not a lot of strict lockdowns.
At the time, how did you feel about this whole very drastic measure to lock everything down? You know, I mean, of course, you know, when the medical experts say that this is a pandemic and then that, you know, the death rate is like higher than the flu and everything. I mean, we listen to the experts, I suppose, but like as a travel vlogger, how did you feel about this whole lockdown situation? Did you feel like it was warranted or it was reasonable?
I think it was reasonable, just because we didn't know, based on what I was reading in the news, we didn't really understand it too much. But like for me, myself, I hated it, obviously, because I couldn't travel. The one thing I want to do, like, so I really value like freedom of location and freedom of time, and being able to go where I want, when I want is like the number one thing I value. And as you can imagine, being restricted from going here to there was the worst. We did hunker down in a couple of these countries and we got used to it, but yeah.
So you spent like 5 or 7 months in Egypt?
Yeah.
How was that? What was it like living in Egypt?
Yeah, well, yeah, for like 3 months there was, in the area I was at, because I was in like the tourist or like the center of the city, that was pretty locked down. There was a big curfew at night. But after I had left, I had learned that just like a mile away, there was like no curfews and no lockdowns. So it's kind of like,
Oh, wow.
yeah, it was kind of like I was like a prisoner to this little area within central Cairo.
So when you had that curfew and then you just sort of like, was it like a touristy area or were you mainly just hanging out with the locals? Because I mean, that itself is a pretty cool experience.
Yeah.
For a lot of people who have never been to Egypt, right? So what's Egypt like for you?
Well, the first 3 months of the lockdown, you know, everybody's going crazy. What's going on? There was a good 3 months, and I didn't realize this until I actually thought about it. There was a good 3 months where the only person I interacted with was the delivery driver giving me food. And I look back, I'm like, I hadn't talked to anybody for 3 months, like in person.
Oh, man.
So it was, and I was like, so I started trying to make friends like on the internet, and I did. And I remember the first time hanging out, I felt super awkward being able to like, it was just like 3 months of no interaction with anybody. But yeah.
Right. And were your like family and friends back home worried about you? It's like, oh, Collin's just go missing in Egypt, and then, or did you guys like do the Zoom calls and everything?
Oh yeah, we definitely communicated. My mom, she trusts my word and everything, that if I'm safe, I'm good. I'm not gonna, you know, not be like hiding anything from her. So she trusts me in that aspect. So it was a lot of just like, hey, don't worry, worst comes to worst, I'll just get deported or something. Like
And so in the middle of the pandemic, and you know, obviously I don't even have to describe it to you what was happening in the rest of the world, including America, Korea, Japan, China. I mean, just the strict lockdown that you could imagine. But you were still kind of doing the traveling and meeting up with people through that path of least resistance. At some point, do you sort of kind of get sick of traveling and then doing the thing, or you still have that, you know what, this is just the way I do things, this is my lifestyle, and this is just what I'm going to be doing for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, so in the long term, it's definitely something that I'm going to continue doing. But it's just like if you're at work, you need to take a break, right? So the longest throughout that whole time, I was away from home for 16 months. And I remember month 16, it was just like, I need to go home. You know, I need a break from all this. Because going home for me is like the vacation, you know?
Right.
Sure, It sounds really nice to experience the world, and it is. However, it's a lot of work to do that. So me just being able to come home to my bedroom here and just not have to worry about what food I'm going to eat, how I'm going to interact with people, how I'm going to get around is just like a huge relief. Reset my batteries, and like right now, at the end of this month, I should be heading right back out again. So,
oh, where are you off to now?
Back to Asia for sure. Thailand, Vietnam. You know, I want to do the whole circuit of Southeast Asia again, just because I hadn't done it for over 3 years now. So, and Asia is the first place that I've been to outside of my own country, China, and, you know, Southeast Asia and whatnot. So it's definitely a place that's strong in my heart, and it's a place that I miss. So,
well, I guess then I have to ask you, what do you think it'll be like to go back to China if you could? Do you think that you would want to, or do you think you'll be able to?
If the restrictions, I know some people who did go back to China, and like I would be watching their videos and a lot of restrictions. I don't know what it is now, but this was maybe a few months ago. But I remember I was like, if I have to go to China and quarantine for 2 weeks, like I'm not going to go, you know.
Right.
I absolutely want to go back to China, and I would love to maybe even live there again. However, if I don't have to experience what I experienced or what we experienced throughout the pandemic, I'm staying far away from that, you know. So
yeah, doing just self-quarantining just sucks.
Right, yeah.
I mean, China is one of those places I love to visit too, just because I'm just not very well traveled. But for some reason, our audience seem to think that we have this like deep connection with China because we have our reporters there,
right.
And they're like, oh, you guys are getting like government permits, and we're like, no, we're not. It's all just like citizen reporters, and then freelancers and things like that. So
that's a huge sentiment I see online all the time. Like if you see any like China travel vloggers, there's always somebody in the comments like, "Oh, you're sponsored. You're getting paid to do this." And I'm pretty sure there are, but I feel like the majority aren't. You know, so it's very interesting that you guys even go through that.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to have this discussion with you regarding China, just because I'm personally curious about this point. Of course, if we look at a Chinese vlogger that are like foreign vloggers in China, you don't know for a fact that whether they're sponsored or not, or maybe people can make that assumption whenever we do interviews in China. Oh, these guys are like obviously like sponsored by the Chinese government or something like that, which we're not. Do you sort of get that accusations yourself? What about I'm sure there are a lot of other foreign vloggers in China or people who used to vlog that you would even mind collaborating with, but how do you sort of deal with that unwarranted like political pressure? Just because you just definitely want to go back to China, and I'm sure that as a matter of fact, there are actual restrictions just because they have different system to a typical democratic system that you see outside of China.
Regarding China, I actually don't recall ever getting any like comments about that. I think it's because of like the content of my video. I like
right.
Had I not like discovered the fake markets, I'm pretty sure I would have absolutely got stuff like that, just because I'm like, oh, this is great here in China. Look at this cool place. Look at this great food. You know, people are going to accuse you of, all that stuff. But I think it's just because of the nature of my videos where, I mean, who's paying me to go haggle in some fake market? Yeah, they're funding me.
Yeah, I'm just kind of interested to hear your thoughts on the supposedly, at least what's portrayed in the current landscape in mainstream media, in Western media or elsewhere, that right now if you go to China, there's absolutely like zero freedom, right? At least that's what I hear from the mainstream media, with all these like AI, face detection, as to social credit system and all that kind of stuff that you hear about. Does that, number one, concern you that, oh, okay, maybe I'm sort of going back to the environment that wasn't the case back in 2015, 2016? Do you sort of have any of those concerns?
Yeah, if I go back, it's definitely something I'm going to be keeping my eye on. There's so much different information out there that it's hard to tell what is real and what is not. So I try to, like I have friends who still live in China, so it's like I try to chat with them and be like,
oh, really? What are they saying as foreigners that are living there in the current environment?
They said everything is starting to feel normal. I remember I was chatting with one of my friends there in China. This was maybe like a year or so ago, where he couldn't get barely any food because they would lock you into their homes, their apartments. So they would have in the compound of each apartment block would get rationed food delivered to the courtyard or whatever, and you'd have to go out in the courtyard and grab food, or I don't know exactly how all that worked, but that was the sentiment. And he was telling me he went 3 days without eating, and I'm like, bro, seriously, you need to do something, otherwise you're gonna I don't obviously
yeah, you're gonna starve,
right, bro.
Yeah.
Obviously I'm telling him while he's starving, but yeah, it's so I think I've heard recently that stuff is getting better, but at the same time, I've heard that in the past, and then it got worse again. You know what I'm saying? So
knowing all that, it wouldn't necessarily stop you from going to China again.
It would,
just because you kind of want to find out for yourself.
Yeah.
Just because you're hearing so many conflicting information.
If there was restriction in movement, I would definitely not go. Yeah, I would definitely it's hard. With all the social credit stuff, I don't think that would apply to many foreigners, if at all. But as far as if there's restriction in movement and whatnot, I wouldn't go back just because I value that so much, being able to just freely go somewhere.
Right.
But other than that, yeah, I feel like even living in there, or I feel like even living there at the time, we were being surveillanced all the time anyway. But like I said, I haven't read anything. I'm not really sure what it is right now regarding surveillance or anything like that.
Did you say that you felt like you're being monitored when you're sort of living there before?
Well, yeah, that was the sentiment. If you go on WeChat, which is the most popular messaging app in China, we'd be in groups with other expats, other YouTubers and whatnot. And anytime somebody mentioned a VPN, because those were illegal in China, I do this because it's not illegal. It's illegal, but it's not. I don't know. It's a very gray area. But
yeah, it's definitely a gray area.
But everybody would be like, "Don't say the word VPN, otherwise," because you would hear stories about group chats getting shut down because they start talking about things that they don't want you to talk about. So it's definitely, you definitely feel like you're being surveillanced in that way through the messaging apps.
Actually, now that you mention it, literally last week, I had a friend, an old elementary school friend visiting, because he actually lives in China now, but then he works there, and then he because of the quarantine and the lockdown sort of ended, that the Chinese people cannot come to Korea. So he visited, and he was actually just talking about how on WeChat, group chat, especially if you have more than 2 or 3 people in that group chat, and then you mention particular words like Xi Jinping or something like that, then the group chat automatically gets shut down. That's what I heard. And I was like, really? Even now? It's like, oh, absolutely, probably more so now. And so you're just not allowed to talk about a certain things, which to somebody who's living outside of China, again, that might be the norm for them, and they're perfectly okay with that. But because I'm just not used to that, I'm pretty sure that you're not used to that either. So, how do you deal with that kind of thing, especially if that's something you're not used to?
Yeah. At the time, it was just not something that you didn't really think about it, because it's I wasn't going to say anything bad in the first place, because I don't care about politics like that. But at the same time, it's you say something that you didn't think was bad, but now you're in trouble for something. So it's definitely not a good feeling. And that definitely was a thing where group chats would get shut down and the likes. So even talking one-on-one to a friend. So
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
like anything,
Oh, you mean like on
yeah,
WeChat?
on WeChat especially, yeah.
Right. That means they must have this like a filter where you know,
Absolutely.
it just gets caught, right? Yeah, yeah. Wow. Anywho, so yeah, you could you could either go visit China again, or you could just do like the Asia
Yeah.
tour again. But by the way, how does it feel to be home with all these different like experiences and perspectives, and then you come home and sort of like everybody's the
Right.
same, right? How does that feel?
I mean, to me, it feels good because it's a sense of comfort. You know, I have all my friends from school days, and I have my family, and I try not to talk about my travels too much because nobody really cares. You know, it's like, oh, this one time,
really?
well, this one time I was in Bangkok. Like, you have to refrain from like recalling points where you were all around the world, so you don't. I don't know. But when people do ask me, yeah,
okay.
I feel like that's a normal thing, though. It's like nobody cares unless they do ask you about it. They just think it's cool, like you're living your life. Everybody's living their own life, and yeah.
Right.
So like I'll be coming home and they'll be like, "Oh, there's a new store up the street. Did you see it?" I'll be like, "Yeah."
Yeah, I actually would have thought that you instantly become the most interesting
Yeah.
guy in your neighborhood, and then you know there's just so many different stories. But I guess kind of people like, oh yeah, they just go about living their
Yeah, I
lives.
mean, and that's fair too. It's like I understand people got their own lives, they got their kids, they got their family, they got their own things to focus on and worry about. Just like I am, I'm focusing on traveling. It's the same thing, right?
Right. How do you respond to this? Like I don't know if it's a negative stereotype, but certainly a perception that typical Americans just do not care about the world, like outside of the United States. They just don't care whatever's happening in the world. It's just like, yeah, it's their own thing. You know, they're probably, at least the perception would dictate that they're just pretty ignorant about anything. You know, to them, Asia is still Asia, Africa is Africa. How do you kind of feel about that perception or
I
stereotype?
feel that's true, definitely. Yeah, I feel.
Really?
I mean, isn't there like a statistic like more than half of Americans don't even have a passport? Don't quote me on that, but I think that's something like that is true.
I didn't know that.
So,
yeah, I didn't know that.
Definitely a thing. I mean, America's big though. You know, we got so much diversity.
It is
it's
big,
huge.
yes.
You got so much diversity in land. So I do understand. Like you could just travel all over America alone and experience so much. But it's definitely a thing. I think it's like unless you go out and travel, you don't. You're a little self-centered. And this is probably not just even for America. It's probably for anybody who hasn't really
Right,
traveled. But which is fine. But that's just my perception on it.
So at this point, you're very much of like a one-man team,
Correct,
right?
yeah.
Like, do you have a team filming you, or do you just do everything by
Yeah,
yourself?
everything is just by myself. I film, edit it, everything. So
Do you wish you had a team, or you had a partner that travels with you, or with a group of friends or something like that? Or does it actually? My question is, does it sometimes get a bit lonely because you're always sort of in that independent creator mindset?
yeah, that loneliness is definitely a thing that does happen. For me, it's important to wherever I go to try to form a community. That's why I like going back to Thailand so much. Is because I have a community there. I know as soon as I get off the plane,
Right.
I can hit somebody up and we can go out for
Yeah.
beers that night. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, it's like it's definitely a balance. So I was like during that pandemic when I left Egypt to meet my friend in Turkey, we had been traveling together for I don't know, maybe almost a year at that point. From Turkey to Tanzania, we had been traveling. And then it was just like, all right, I want to try to go solo again. You know what I'm saying? Because there's pros and cons. Traveling with somebody, it's always like you always have somebody to talk to. You always have somebody to hang out with. However, you can't just up and leave somewhere without informing the other person or agreeing upon where we should go next, you know? So there's definitely a balancing act, but I think forming communities wherever I go is probably the best option for me. Because solo travel, to me, I love solo travel. It's probably the best way to travel for sure.
Really, because a lot of people, including myself, will be pretty scared by the
Yeah.
idea that you have to do things
Yeah.
alone, right?
Well, yeah, it's just like the more you travel, the more the more used to it you are. So it just becomes like second nature, right?
I know you actually have this as one of this FAQ type of things on your website, but and I know a lot of people ask you about your relationship status. So, like, how do you have time for a stable relationship or girlfriends if you're constantly traveling and stuff?
It's definitely difficult because they have to understand my lifestyle and like this is what I am going to do. So like they have to be able to understand that and deal with it in a way. Like if I need to go to a different country, like we need to maintain long distance, you know what I'm saying? And long distance relationships can be difficult. So it's always just trying to balance that out with doing what I love and what is my career right now and having a stable relationship. And if a partner couldn't understand that lifestyle, I wouldn't be able to be with them. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Unless you guys travel together, right?
True. Yeah, that too.
But sounds like that's not something that you have been doing a
No,
while.
I hadn't had a girlfriend and traveled with her, no. I mean, I've had girlfriends and we went on trips, but not like full-time travel.
Do you sort of have any long-term goals as to where you want to take this channel and like this brand of yours to?
My ultimate goal was just to make videos. Like that's just been always a dream of mine, being able to just first make videos, but being able to travel and make videos. So for me, my goal always with YouTube from the start was longevity. Like if I can just stay living this lifestyle, creating videos that people enjoy, that was like my ultimate passion. As far as like expanding out into like a business, I've had ideas in the past, which actually now thinking of it, but it's something it's something I would do, but I just have to have something that I can offer that I know that I would be passionate about and other people would be too. But as far as that, in the meantime, I'm totally happy with just being able to create content and try to make the most engaging content I can, the most high quality content I can, and show people the world. And as long as people are still entertained by it, I'm definitely going to be doing it.
And what kind of advice would you have for like aspiring travel vlogger type of YouTubers or content creators that kind of want to do what you do? And because you just seem to be very unique in this space.
Yeah, I would say just jump into it. There's not going to be a right time to ever do it. You just got to do it. And I would say to start out, if you're starting from day one and you're like, I want to move to this country to start a YouTube channel, the best thing to do is just document what you're doing, because you don't need an idea right now. You just need to get better. You have this vision in your head of what you want to do, and then you have your skill set. And there's this huge gap. So just by doing and creating, you're chopping away and getting closer to that vision you have in your head. So just by doing and documenting your life, it doesn't have to be interesting. Just do it. And then once you get like, for me, it was like I was like 30 videos in, and then I would look back on my like library of content to understand how much I've improved, where my channel's growing, or where my channel's going and growing, and what I want to do based upon what I see in that library already and the skills that I have learned. So if you're starting from day one, just jump into it and do it, and you'll figure out a niche or whatever. You'll figure something out later on down the line. Is
another part of that equation where people just don't have this expectations that, oh, if something doesn't blow up quickly, then it's not working. So how they just want everything super quick. Like, oh, I made one video. Why is this not going viral? So therefore, this is not for me. What do you say to that?
I say this. I'll ask you a question. If you can see yourself in 10 years creating videos, so if you're creating videos for 10 years, and 10 years later you still haven't made a penny, would you still create videos? If the answer is no, then it's probably not. You're probably in that situation where, oh, I haven't gone viral yet, and you're probably going to not want to continue. You're not going to be passionate about it. But if you have that passion, if your answer is yes, I'll continue making, even if I can look 10 years into the future and I still haven't made 1 cent, then definitely do it because that is your passion.
I think you nailed it because, yeah, like people tend to think about in terms of like monetization or fame or influence, and that's probably mostly why people get into this space, right?
I think so.
Just to be famous and make a lot of money.
Sorry, how did Asian Boss start out?
Well, actually, I should have asked you this at the beginning, but yeah, it's like, how did you know about Asian Boss? And then maybe I can go from there, yeah.
Oh, yeah, so, yeah, I knew about Asian Boss once I started living in China. You just popped up on my feed, and that was no simpler than that. And I just started following you guys and watching you guys all the time, so. Then I reached out to you guys recently saying, because you came on my Instagram feed, I was like, oh yeah, they're on Instagram too. So, and then I hit you guys up. So,
to answer your question, how we started as like, yeah, we didn't really care about the number of subscribers or how much money we were gonna make, because I mean, if you know about us, even now, like we're kind of struggling, right? But we just had this mission to bring people and cultures together through authentic sort of local people's voices and stories. And I just think that we just need more of that in this world. Because if we don't have the likes of you and I and people that are passionate about wanting to actually do something about actively connect with, particular culture or different countries, then all we have to rely on is the mainstream media and all these, news anchors from their fancy offices in New York tell us about what's happening in other parts of the world. And I'm like, I don't want to listen to you guys.
What you mentioned about your channel, we're showing the West, East meets West. Like, this is how it is. That's always been I remember when I started out, that was always my, like, all right, I don't know about the East, but I'm going to document it and show people. Because I knew, like you said, mainstream media, I knew, like, that's not how it is. Even though I haven't experienced it, I just knew that's not how it is. So that was always my goal, too, as well. It's just like, I'm from the West, and I'm going to go travel throughout the East, and I'm going to show people how it really is. That was, like, my main thing I wanted to do. So I'm glad you really brought that up, because that's been, like, the #1 goal of my channel as well.
Yeah, and I think that's why when you reached out, it just like immediately connected. Just anybody who's taking action. I mean, it's also part of your enjoyment and what we genuinely want to do with passion. But anybody who's actually doing that is a friend of ours, and has my respect. Yeah, so yeah, just keep doing what you're doing, man. And thank you for coming on, I guess, this show. It's kind of weird, calling this a show, but yeah, just really appreciate having had the opportunity to have a chat with you. And, we wish that hopefully we can actually catch up in person. So, if you happen to be traveling through Korea, maybe I can even tag along if you are in the mood for bargaining, for some
we can do it.
And just learn some stuff off you.
That'd be awesome.